I started to introduce this work into what I was doing with the patients. Right away, within the first week or two, half of them bolted. They said, "I didn't come here for that. I came here to talk about my life. What is this you're putting here? What are you asking me about imagery? What are you introducing?" I mean, they really were adverse to all of this, and they left. So I found myself, losing half of my income right away. So I learned later on how wonderful that was that this happened. And so I had two patients in analysis at the time, and so I asked the patients, these two, whether I could introduce a new way of looking at dreams, because we would associate the dreams. Everybody associates the dreams. What does it mean? They try to understand, analyze, interpret it, and so on. And I said, "I'd like you, if you would be interested to do this, would you be willing?" And they said yes. So one of them told me a dream. They both told me dreams, and one of them told me this dream, and I asked them to go back into the dream and to explore it in waking consciousness. So they entered back into the night dream, and they embarked on a process that I learned with her, with Colette, called waking dream. So they did dream while awake. So they went into this dreamscape, and she explored the dreamscape, and as a consequence of this, and with the other one as well, they both finished their analysis within 30 days, just like the guy in Jerusalem. And it was a kind of real confirmation for me about the power of this process that I had been taught. I knew there was a truth here, but the power of it began to really seep in now that as I was applying it. So this young lady leaves, and 4 months later, she gives me a call, and she said, "I wanted to tell you that, the man, if you recall, the man that I met in the waking dream, who was a medieval knight, and he had a lion walking alongside of him. You remember I mentioned to him and that I connected with him?" I said, "Of course." And she said, "Well, I met him, and we've now come together, and we're living together now, and he absolutely resembles the man that I described to you in the waking dream experience." I said, "This is phenomenal, because generally that's the way it works. You go through these inner experiences, these inner discoveries, and they materialize in the world. And that's a spiritual principle that comes out of this work. What you conceive, what you perceive in the inner form of consciousness gets manifested or birthed in the world itself, what we call the outer form, here in the time-space world." So she meets him, and he's very taken when she describes to him what I did with her. And he said, "That really strikes a chord, and I'm really taken by that, and I would like him to come and teach in my school." So there Colette had told me 4 months earlier, that to go and teach. And I'm saying to her, "Where am I teaching?" She's falling asleep. And this man invites me to come and teach at a training institute in New York to fourth-year students, senior students, and to teach an elective in this work to these students. There were about 6 of them, and all I remember now is that they were 6 women who were over 6 feet tall. I was teaching a class of Amazons, and they elected. It was an elective, so they elected to learn more about this. And so the school I went to was called the National Institutes for the Psychotherapies. And so I began my process of teaching, and as I began to teach it, what was I teaching? It would just come to me. The understanding would just filter into me. I wouldn't say I was channeling it, but as I moved on I took the risk to go and teach without a real background, without the academics, and I really went in and I leapt into the whirlpool, so to speak. As I did that, certain articles started to come my way, and a book came my way about this process. And so when I started to find there were other people around, not in New York, but other people around who were engaged in a similar sort of like process like this. And I remember Colette telling me that when she was 4 or 5 years old, her father, who was a very noted neurosurgeon, the most noted neurosurgeon in Europe, in France and in Algeria. she was Algerian by birth, and so there was a close connection between Algeria and France over many, many years. And he had taught in the French medical system, and he had a street named after him and a hospital named after him. And he would have her sit in his practice room, and he would teach her when she was 4 or 5 years old. And one day a Sufi master came in, and he started a conversation with this little girl, and said to her, with the father's permission, said, I'd like you to come at dawn and meet me by the river in Algiers. And so that morning, dawn, she crept out of the window, she clambered out, and she went down to the river, and the Sufi master picked her up and threw her into the river, into the current. And she is now in this current, and she's being carried by this current, and she screams out at him, I don't know how to swim. And he says to her, well, if you can't swim, you're going to drown. Meaning that he took no step to do anything to take care of her. She had to find on her own what to do to take her out of this emergency state that she was in. And so she learned to swim very quickly at that time. But that was a great lesson about how you step into the unknown. You take a step of faith, and you don't know where it's going, and you risk taking that choice, that decision, and don't know what the outcome will be. And you are, in effect, I became a mental daredevil. And in doing that, as you do that, as you will learn in your life, as you take up this kind of work, that things begin to come. As Luke said in the Gospel, for the measure you give out is the measure you get back. And as you put yourself into this kind of stream of life, the universe begins to support you, and begins to sustain you and provide you with what you need. So I saw kinds of analogies to what she went through to what I was going through in my practice, and how I began, to do this work and apply it in my everyday life.